think finally the harbor patrol there was starting to catch on that we've been exceeded our 5-day stay or whatever. So we kind of tweaked our new furler there.
Join us on our journey as we sail the Pacific Northwest from Vancouver Island to Mexico.
We decided to get up this morning. We're still a few days ahead of another big swell coming in. So we have a couple days to get further south here. So we're starting our way down to Oceana today. We're just gonna, or Oceanside, whatever, some ocean place. And we're going to grab a dock there for a night just because it's about a 12-hour, 13-hour stretch between here and Mission Bay, and there's nowhere to anchor in between. So we'll grab a dock. It's about $33 American, not a big deal. And then that'll get us about 7.5 hours away from Mission Bay, so that will make for a lot shorter days instead of doing any getting up like 3 in the morning kind of nonsense. So for $30, we'll buy ourselves a little bit of sleep and a nicer, shorter passage. Yeah. And get ahead of the swell that's coming in. As you can see, we're rocking right now because there's pretty good bumps still out here. I've been surfing for the last few days. It's been lovely. But we are moving on. But a little foggy this morning, as you can see out here. It's starting to burn off. There's a ton, if you look around, there's a ton of kayakers and stand-up paddleboarders and stuff here. Just keeping an eye out. It's a really fun spot. We've really quite enjoyed it. And onward and upward from here. Alright, so we're about an hour and a half out of Dana Point, and we're running wing on wing, downwind, doing about 5 knots. And it is lovely.
It is lovely.
Still lots of fog all the way around us. It's starting to burn off, but it's kind of a pleasant surprise. We haven't got to sail a lot in the last handful of days that we've been just tootling down the coast, so it's nice. We actually get to get some sail up. And what I might do is, it's a little trick for those of you whenever you're running with a pole, is you see how when it's light wind like this and the sail is too bagged out, sometimes the leech of the sail will just start to fold in on itself like that. So what you could do is put a couple turns on the furler, and it'll just flatten out the sail. It'll take a little bit of the bag out of it. It'll take a little bit of the bag out of the bottom of the sail, the foot of the sail, and just kind of allow the top to roll a little differently. I'll show you actually while I'm talking about it. May as well show you, so I can always let it back out, not a big deal. So see, it's just kind of flopping up there. It's really, really light air, and you can actually hear my echo off the sails. That's great. So you can just do a couple turns on it, and it'll just kind of flatten it out a bit. Just hold it a little tighter, and you see what it does there, right? Instead of it folding in on itself, you get a little bit of a ripple, but the leech will still stay out there and catch the air. It just flattens it out a bit. So that's something you can do if you're having a hard time with your sail folding in on itself a lot. It just kind of tightens up the leech of the sail, so rather than it folding in, it just kind of, you'll see how it does that. It just kind of straightens out and then catches the air again, right? It just doesn't have as much material to fold right in on itself. So, and then when there's a little bit more air, you can actually let the sail back out. And it sounds counterintuitive. You're like, light air, you want all the sail out you can get, you know, to maximize your sail area. And that's not wrong, but it's also depends on the conditions, right? So we're in following seas, the boat's rocking back and forth, it wants to fold the sail in on itself. So sometimes it's better just to flatten that out a bit, lose a little bit of sail area, and then once the wind picks up, it'll help to keep the sail full so you can actually let it back out and it'll fill up with all the extra air. But this is light air, we're sailing at 3 to 4 knots. and running with the seas, doing about 4.5 to 5 knots. So that's pretty cool. We're actually going a little faster than the wind right now.
Neat.
Yeah, because we're running with the tides and the currents right now. And just to throw a little bit more air into the equation, let's see if we can get that little jib out there. You saw us running in the previous video like this where we had wing on wing, and then I called it wing on wind. Get the other, get the jib out here playing as well. Yeah, see, so that's kind of a better angle there now. Stick to it. So yeah, sleeping tonight, eh? What do you think?
Hit and miss. No, that's not the appropriate reaction.
I think that's how it's gonna be tonight.
In the middle of the night while we're trying to sleep.
It's cold and early.
It's cold, early, and wet.
And yeah, everything's very moist. Morgan had to fight off the sea lions to get out.
I almost didn't win that fight.
I got the camera on just a minute too late after she had already went, ah! Big sea lion turned around at her.
Charged at me. Just wanted to return the key.
So funny.
Yeah, so funny being attacked by sea lions. Alright, so on our way to Mission Bay today.
Indeed.
A long day, which is why we have to get up early. Looks like another nice one.
Yeah, it looks like a beauty in there. Hopefully there's a little breeze again. Yesterday was just like a perfect little breeze.
It was a perfect one.
We're in a little clear spot here, but there's like a bank right off the coast, which is kind of nice because the fog bank creates a temperature inversion kind of thing, and you get that little bit of a sea breeze happening.
Let's hope so.
Some Ethereum sticking to it.
Alright. Yeah.
So this is pretty much as good as sailing gets right now. It's 9 a.m. We're doing about 5.5 to 6 knots. Winds are variable between 5 and 9 knots right now. And I want to show you guys something. If you look at the tack of the Genoa there, and you can see the tack and the luff of the sail there starting to ripple a little bit. So that tells you one of two things. You could start to sheet in the sail and clean that up a little bit. But I'm not going to, and the reason I'm not going to is if you look at the rest of the sail, you point the camera up here, it's still got a nice full shape, and it's light air. You'll see it start to luff a little bit at the top of the sail, right? So like I said, I can sheet that in, tighten it up a little bit, get a little bit more performance out of the sail. But right now I'm happy we're doing 5 to 6 knots. We're not racing today. The reason that I'm not, you know, rushing to trim the sail is that we have the sails pretty much trimmed for this course that we're on, for comfort. So we're making coffee and breakfast and stuff, so I'm not really wanting to get the boat right on its ear. And secondly, when you're sailing close hauled and using an autopilot or you're locking your steering, the nice thing about having the sail just starting to luff a little bit at the tack there is that if the winds are variable and you go from like 5 knots to 10 knots of a gust, the boat's going to want to round up, and as it rounds up closer to the wind, it'll start to backwind the leading edge of that sail a little bit and depower the sail and allow the rudder to correct. Whereas if I have the sail trimmed really hard, you know, hard on the wind, and the gust hits, it's going to maintain its foil, its shape right up hard on the wind and overdrive the rudder in some instances, right? So we have the autopilot on and we're close hauled. So letting it just luff a little bit allows the sail to depower just slightly as the rudder's correcting, making corrections for the gust. And it just means a lot less of this kind of action going on with the wind. So just a little thing to consider. Typically, you want your sails trimmed nicely so they're not luffing. But if you got just that little tickle in the front of the sail and you're close hauled, you're comfortable, and you've got your wheel locked or you're on autopilot, it's not necessarily a bad thing until it starts luffing a whole bunch, right? So it's luffing a little bit because we're a little high up on our course, and now as the rudder's making correction, it's gonna tighten up a little bit. See, it starts to luff this a little bit. Now it's tightening up as we fall back off as the rudder makes correction. Just a little thing to consider. You don't always have to have your sails trimmed like you're racing. It all depends on what you're trying to achieve. The other thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is telltales. If you look at the back of the main there, the leech line, you'll see that the telltales are kind of wrapping forward around the back of the sail. So you see that the mainsail is trimmed really nicely because the wind's coming off the sail, and the telltales are just kind of wrapping the back of the sail. That's a nice look. It's trimmed pretty well. You can see the telltales on the inside of the sail here, the leeward side, or the windward side, sorry. You can see that they're laying nice and straight back, eh? See how they're pointing straight back, right? Yeah. So they're coming straight back, the wind's coming across the inside of the sail, and it's creating a bit of a negative air pressure on the other side of the sail. That's why the telltales are wrapping the back of the sail, the leech of the sail. So that's a well-trimmed mainsail right there. Of course, as you come further down the sail, you can see that the telltales lower down are kind of pointing down more. The top of the sail is doing most of the work right now. And then you'll see on the other side, the leeward side of the sail, the telltales are kind of flipping around. They're pulling forward, they're getting pulled forward because there's negative air pressure in the front of the sail. And trim the genoa a little bit. Okay, so the genoa, just tighten that up just a bit because we're a little closer to the wind right now. Mainsail still looks pretty good. That's a nice trim sail. And the last thing I was going to talk about was where we typically sail along when we're just doing the coastal cruising here. We don't like to sit right up against shore. You can see we're a good clip out from the shore right now. It's a little bit poor visibility, it's kind of foggy this morning. But we typically sail along the 3 mile line. So if you look at your charts or you look at your chart plotter, you'll actually see like a little pink line that kind of runs along. We typically sail right along that 3 mile line for a couple of reasons. One, we're far enough offshore that if anything goes wrong, we've got time to make adjustments, right? We've got time to sail away from shore we've got time to work on our engine, whatever it is. We haven't had really to do that so far, knock on wood. The other reason is that the 3 mile line denotes where commercial vessels are not to travel. So commercial vessels aren't supposed to be cruising inside of the 3 mile line. So if we're sailing right along the 3 mile line, we're kind of at that border where you'll have a lot of fishing vessels closer into shore, like a lot of the daytime, you know, casual fishermen or whatever, recreational fishermen in their runabouts and such. They're usually going to be inside of the 3 mile line. The larger fishing boats are going to be anywhere around here and further out, and any commercial traffic will be outside of this. So running along the 3 mile line is nice because we've got time and space away from shore. We're away from commercial vessels. We're kind of outside of where you're going to find crab pots and a lot of fishing activity, and then you'll see the odd commercial fishing vessel around here. Just something that I thought was worth mentioning because, you know, for example, my dad would ask, like, you know, how far are you usually sailing off the coast, right? And they noticed that pattern that we're typically running along a certain distance, and he was curious as to why, and those are the reasons why. There's a couple other reasons too. For example, when we're 3 miles offshore, we're kind of far enough offshore to get away from any of the thermal activity that's happening along the mountains and stuff, right along the coast. So as you get closer to the coast, sometimes the wind will flip around on you or do weird things. You'll get into some wind shadows or whatnot. So there's that. But yeah, the wind usually a little steadier out here anyway if you're into sailing. So we like to get a little farther out because we can actually set our sails and have a little bit better consistent air out here. So yeah, so those are all the things I wanted to mention. Lately we haven't talked a lot about anything technical sailing because we've just been, you know,
Hopping around, using the motor a lot.
yeah, we were motoring for a good few days, the last handful of days or so that we were out from place to place. So this is nice, we're actually sailing again. I can talk about sailing stuff, and yeah, you can see what the sail's doing right here, right? We're pretty close to the wind, and the leading edge of the sail's luffing there a little bit because we're actually like almost 10 degrees higher than my course. So now it's going to fall off a bit and load the sail back up a bit, and now you can see the sail's already got a better shape to it. So there you go. Yeah, we're still tooling around between 4 and 5 knots. Right now the wind has dropped down to 5 knots. So very perfect day for sailing. It's quite lovely.